Right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on the support for professions to become NIHR Senior Investigators. To start with, some introductions. My name is Sarah Kutub. I am one of the program managers at the NIHR Academy, and I'm part of the team that manage the NIHR Senior Investigator Award. We have with us today on the panel Professor Jill Manthorpe, who is Emerita of Social Work at King's College London, and is also chair of the NIHR Senior Investigator Funding Subcommittee for Social Care. Also on the panel today, we have Steve Edgar, who is an NIHR Public Contributor Committee member and has been part of the NIHR Senior Investigator Committee. We also have with us on the call my colleague Lucy Scarsbrick. Lucy can help you with any issues that you face while during the webinar, so please feel free to use the chat function. We'll be able to help you with any queries. Now, in terms of the webinar today, just to share the aims and what we hope to be able to share with you today is the expectations of applicants for the role of the NIHR Senior Investigator, some details about the process and timelines for application, and then much more sort of emphasis on the expectations of the funding committee with regards to the applications and what they're looking forward to receiving in this particular round. I'll start us off by telling a little bit about the NIHR Senior Investigator Award and some details about the Round 19 funding opportunity, which is currently open for applications. I'll then pass over to Jill to tell us more about the award and the applications from the funding committee perspective, and then on to Steve to tell us from the public contributor perspective. And hopefully we'll have plenty of time towards the end for questions and answers. So we'd encourage you to continue to submit those in the Q&A box. Now, with regards to the award itself, what is the NIHR Senior Investigator Award and who are the senior investigator community? So the award is set up to recognize the most prominent and prestigious researchers of applied health and social care. Senior investigators help shape the direction of health, social care, and public health research in the UK. So they're very much the active leaders within the NIHR research community and act as both mentors for early career researchers, but also as ambassadors across the health and social care system. And their role is very much to develop research capacity and talent, particularly in underrepresented groups and specialities and areas of geography as well. So based on that, who should apply to be an NIHR Senior Investigator? We're looking for exceptional, ambitious research leaders who are keen to expand their work with the NIHR, with the DHSC, and the wider sector. This really kind of sets the award apart from other NIHR offerings which relate to career development or research development grants, because this is very much, the award is very much premised on developing the relationship, the existing relationship that you have with the NIHR, and to build upon it and to sort of extend that further. So we very much look as senior investigators as ambassadors who are continuing to support the NIHR and the NIHR's work. And we think of them as researchers who work across the remit of NIHR funding, particularly in priority areas around social care, around public health. And what we're very interested in seeing and in expanding further is the diversity of our senior investigator community, which is why we are very keen to receive applications from professions such as nurses, midwives, allied health professionals, from methodologists, from social care researchers, from pharmacists, to really expand the remit of the work that the senior investigator community is involved in. I want to highlight some of the changes that are happening to the Senior Investigator Award. So for round 19, the award will now be open to researchers from Northern Ireland as well. So we have up to 2 senior investigators from Northern Ireland as part of this cohort. This is part of a bigger change that is taking place where senior researchers from across England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales are being brought together as a community of senior investigators. It's worth noting that Scotland and Wales will continue to manage and administer their own schemes. The NIHR will be involved in the administration of the Senior Investigator Award for researchers based in England, and we'll also be expanding that now to Northern Ireland as well. In terms of the award funding itself, so there's some changes that have made to that in this round as well. So discretionary funding remains as it is, but the amounts are now going to be 15,000 per year for 4 years to support research. This is sort of in the nature of the award is such that it continues to be quite discretionary in nature. So we do allow awardees the sort of ability to spend the funding as they see fit. But these are some of the uses that's been put towards by awardees in previous years to cover sort of travel and conference costs, to undertake activities for the development of their research teams, to increase engagement with local authority, other key stakeholders, policymakers, in some instances as bridging funds as well. To provide additional support and such. So really there's quite a large sort of remit which this funding can be used for, and really to really support the work that awardees are undertaking as part of their support of the NIHR's broader research agenda. Now, with regards to the Round 19 funding opportunity, I want to just provide you a brief overview of the application process and some of the information and resources that are available to potential applicants if you're interested in applying for this round. Firstly, all of the award guidance relevant to the Senior Investigator Award is available on the NIHR website. This has been changed considerably from past years if you've previously applied for the award or have had a look at the award guidance. So it might be that you now find information in different parts of the website. There's two that I would signpost you to, which are particularly useful. One is the main award page related to the Senior Investigator Award. And that kind of landing page provides you information about the award in general. So what the Senior Investigator Award is for, about the community, some case studies and profiles to give you an understanding of what senior investigators do. And there's quite a lot of information about the expectations that we have of senior investigators once awarded and the kind of activities that we expect them to undertake as part of their role. And that same award page then links you on to the Senior Investigator Cohort 19 funding opportunity page, which has the specific details about this particular round of funding. So there's information about how to fill out the application form, what are the various sort of application form details, what are the assessment criteria, and further details about that. So that would be the right place to head to if you're looking for further information about this particular funding opportunity. The key things to keep in mind are obviously with regards to this award are eligibility. We've distinguished eligibility requirements for applicants based in England and those based in Northern Ireland. So firstly, with regards to applicants based in England, applicants have to have made a substantial contribution to the NIHR with ongoing contribution planned. This is a question that I'm sure we'll get into the Q&A as well. But what counts as contribution to the NIHR is that we've tried to provide quite a lot of detail about this on the award website pages. I would encourage you to have a look at that, and that gives you a good flavor, hopefully, of the kind of activities that you would need to be involved in for those to count as contribution to NIHR. For you to be eligible to apply for this award, salary has to be funded as a research cost from the NIHR. One thing I just want to make mention of at this point is that if your salary is being funded as a core cost or an in-kind or match funding by an organization that's associated with an NIHR infrastructure award, then please contact the NIHR Academy team to discuss your eligibility before submitting an application. There's particular details and nuances around that we would need to discuss with you beforehand. Secondly, the current active eligible funding must run and extend beyond the 30th of June 2026 in order for you to be eligible for this award. Applicants have to be based in England, and NIHR Global Health and Global Health Research professors with terms ending by the 1st of April 2026 are also eligible to apply for this particular round. For applicants based in Northern Ireland, we've just tried to clarify that requirements are slightly different. For these particular applicants, they must have made meaningful contributions to the delivery of Northern Ireland's strategy for research and development in health and social care research. They have to be employed by an organization based in Northern Ireland and have to have a track record as a chief investigator or lead applicant on significant research grants or awards funded either by Health and Social Care Research and Development Division, the Research Councils, NIHR, or other high quality funding bodies. If you are based in Northern Ireland and are interested in applying for the Senior Investigator Award, please contact Dr. Saoirse Finnegan at the HSNEI to discuss your eligibility before starting an application so she can guide you further on whether you're particular eligible for this round or not. Now, lastly, the main kind of thing with regards to the application process that applicants need to consider is the assessment criteria. We've simplified the assessment criteria for the award into 5 overall categories this round. But it's very important to kind of underscore this point that successful applicants, while they are expected to demonstrate excellence in all 5 criteria, funding committees will not recommend an application that does not demonstrate a significant contribution to the NIHR or equivalent bodies, regardless of scores against other criteria. I make mention of this really to underscore the importance of this particular criteria. It really is sort of the overwhelming criteria against which your application will be assessed. So we'd ask you to really pay careful consideration to that. So the first assessment criteria obviously being contribution to the NIHR, going above and beyond what's expected as part of your role in receipt of an NIHR funding award. And I know that our panel members will be talking about this as well. The second one is working with people and community is hugely important part of the application, where applicants are required to demonstrate that they do have a significant track record of working with people and communities, which is previously called patient-public involvement. The third is research impact, and here applicants are required to demonstrate contribution to growth and research leadership, as well as a track record of engaging with either health and social care commissioners or policy makers in research, as well as showing the relevance of their research portfolio such that it is translated into improvements in outcomes for patients and service users, but also improvements in the efficiency of the system as a whole. And then the fourth assessment criteria is contribution to capacity building, where we ask applicants to demonstrate their track record in training and supporting researchers at all levels, with particular emphasis on both regional and national contributions. And lastly, an assessment criteria that we've really tried to draw out in this round, and we'd encourage applicants to pay careful consideration to this in their application, is proposed future activity. So for first-time applicants, those making an application for a first Senior Investigator Award, this would entail a clear description of the activities that you undertake in line with the stated expectations for NIHR Senior Investigators. But if you're applying for a second term award, this requires applicants to really show what they've done further above and beyond what they've done in their first application. So an application for a second term award, which is very similar to the first term application, without much evidence of additional NIHR contribution is unlikely to be successful. All applications now have to be made via the new NIHR awards management system. That's all linked in within the award guidance, but it's no longer on Aramis, which you may be familiar with if you've applied previously for NIHR funding. So you would need to go onto the new system, set up a new account and fill out the application form, which we are happy to share has been simplified. So hopefully it's an easier job to now fill out this form. The main thing that I want to just draw attention to here is that the way that the form is set out is that there are a few different uploads which you would for which we've provided templates which need to be downloaded, filled out, and then uploaded back onto the system. The key one there is the Senior Investigator Award Case for Support, and that's the form in which you primarily provide all of the evidence against the assessment criteria that I've just gone over. The main thing to mention here from a sort of a procedure point of view is that the application form has within it a sort of some clear indicative word limits. We would very strongly encourage you to adhere to those because there is a page limit to the application itself. So if you go beyond those word limits for each section, you're going to go beyond the overall page limit and you wouldn't be able to upload your application. So please do use those indicative word counts as a good steer of how much information you should be providing within each section. And then there's some further additional uploads that you're also required to fill out and provide. Lastly, just some key dates to draw your attention to if you're interested in applying for this particular round. So applications will close on the 8th of September. We then enter our review and assessment process of the applications with the funding committee meeting usually around December. And then they make their recommendations to the DHSC, and we are able to notify applicants of outcomes possibly around February 2026. Now, this award has a uniform start date, so all awardees start their award on the 1st of April 2026. And the last two things that we've put on here are two mandatory meetings that we expect all awardees who are awarded, who are successful in their application in round 19 to attend. So one is the induction meeting for new award holders, which will be for the 19th of May 2026. And then another meeting to which all senior investigators and research professors of the NIHR are invited to, and that's in the autumn, scheduled for 14th of October 2026. Attendance at both these events is mandatory. It's part of your expectations as receiving an award. So we just want to draw attention to them to make sure that you kind of take this into consideration when you're considering making an application for this particular round. That's essentially sort of hopefully a quick overview of the award itself and the funding opportunity for this round. I'll hand over now to Jill to speak to the funding committee perspective on applications and what they're looking from their angle.
Great, thank you very much, Sarah, for that. That was a very clear explanation of all the many parts of this application. And I think particularly for those of us who might have been used to previous NIHR systems, there is always the trepidation about entering a new system that is promised to be friendly and everything, whereas it's often friendly if you know it. So for people who are not familiar with the new system, do make an attempt to get your application in order in good time, because the new system is always a bit scary. And indeed, particularly, I think for you to alert the university to your requirements, that they too will need to do a letter. Many universities are very familiar with this, but there will be times perhaps in the coming months or so when people are away on holiday and so on, and you want to have all that in order. So I've got a little summary here of things that I'm going to talk about, which is, first of all, emphasizing and underlining so much that bit about the NIHR contribution. Just to mangle somebody's well-known saying, it's ask not what the NIHR has done for you, but what you have done for NIHR, and indeed intend to do. So there are many, many examples of that. And probably if you think hard, you'll know the people in the organization where you work, usually I'll say it's a university, who've done a lot. And you can probably think about them and what they're doing and what meetings they go to and what contributions they make. So, you know, you'll get a good idea, as well as the examples, which we do set out in great detail, the examples of what counts as a contribution to NIHR. And some of them are pretty standard. Doing a few reviews probably won't be enough, but actually mentioning that you do review for NIHR applications is very valued. So don't forget to mention something like that. So we've got that idea about the NIHR contribution. Within that are things like mentoring and supporting early career researchers. It's very easy to say that one does that, but I think what we emphasize in these applications is give us the evidence that you do. So do name names that you have supported so-and-so and so-and-so through their postdoctoral awards, or to get an early career fellowship, or to perhaps get an NIHR doctoral award, how you've done that, what they have gone on to do perhaps, but really outlining the evidence for what you're saying. So as researchers, you know, evidence is second nature, isn't it? So don't forget in the application to really give that evidence, although please do avoid hyperlinks there. We've had occasions whereby people who've worked very collegially have often found it difficult to say, I do this, as opposed to we, my team, my unit, and so on. But it is your application. It's a personal application, not for your team, your unit, or your institution. So don't be afraid, perhaps, to say I when that doesn't necessarily come naturally. You can say I and my team or whatever, but not just a we application, because it is that personal award. So the other bit I would mention, particularly in the NIHR contribution, is that probably in the organization, the university you work for, there will be people who've got a senior investigator award. And if there isn't, and we are very keen on expanding the number of universities who have senior investigators, then do reach out, as they say, to an existing senior investigator, maybe somebody working in your discipline or your area of work, and just talk to them about their application and just get their insight into what worked for them. So that would be very much useful. And a lot of people do that. Sometimes they go to the same allied health professional goes to another similar allied health professional. Sometimes they go beyond that and perhaps go to a registered nurse or somebody working in applied health research or something. It's up to you to see who you think would be really useful and helpful. And usually my experience is that people have been incredibly helpful because they want to build this particularly important and valued part of NIHR. There are occasions, of course, when we talk about supporting research growth that don't necessarily become a part of the language of certain professions or certain areas of applied health and care research. But when we talk about, in my own area of social care, research growth and helping care providers get value for money, helping local authority or integrated commissioners get value for money. That is about research growth, isn't it? It's growing the economy, helping the health and wealth of the nation. So research growth has multiple forms. So look and see what that particular area of your application is wanting to stress. And I've said provide evidence of your own contribution. The panel is familiar with things like what does it mean to be the end author on an application, on a prestigious article, as opposed to the first. We're very familiar with those, and often people spend some time on the panel looking at it and just saying, well, that was really reflecting their work in getting the grant and managing the whole project and so on. And just because they're end author on the publication, that's a sign that they're wanting to develop the careers of perhaps the first or second author and so on. So it's a pretty sophisticated panel in that way. So that, I think, is the sum up of the things I wanted to cover. It's about presenting your own personal application, being very clear about your NIHR contribution. And if today you think that this is not going to be your strong point, well, it's a great reminder, isn't it, about how in the months and years ahead, you can build that up. The NIHR is always wanting willing volunteers for many of its role, and then talking about research growth, because this is our great opportunity now in research to really make the most of this substantial investment that the NIHR is privileged to have. So I'm going to stop there now, and hopefully Sarah is going to tell us the next person, who I believe might be Steve. So thank you for listening and look forward to the comments.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you. That's very useful. And we'll come back to you in the questions. I can see there's some being asked about social care and the underrepresented professions. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk more about that. I'll move on now to Steve, who is one of our panel members from Public Contributor. And Steve will hopefully share some insights on that and what you should really be looking to put in your application with regards to that perspective. So Steve, over to you.
Sarah, and thanks, Jill. I think a lot of the things I'm going to say will echo the things that you said as well. So I'm going to tell you really where people fall down really in the PPI sections, because very often we see excellent applications where the PPI is poor purely because of some simple omissions really. So in the first instance, what I need to say is that we can really only judge what you write on the application. We may know a bit about you because you have a national profile or because you're a very senior researcher and we know a little bit about your work. But if you don't actually put it down on the application, we don't really know anything about that. So my first thing to do to tell you about PPI is please make a very strong narrative story about what your own personal PPI journey is. Base it on facts, not just on general statements. If you have some names and dates of when things happen, that's really important. Particularly, we like to see relatively recent activity within PPI. If you have a very important contribution from a PPI contributor to your research, please feel free to name them. It carries a lot of weight and credibility if you're actually aware of the people who've been involved in these things. Secondly, we give you some very easy headings to follow. How do you integrate PPI into your own research? How you support capacity? How you demonstrate leadership? If you follow those headings, you won't go far wrong. Some people choose to go a little bit off-piste and write in a kind of free-form way, and it makes it quite difficult to judge what it is they're actually doing. Don't waste words on an introductory paragraph telling us how important PPI is, because we all know how important PPI is. Go straight into how you have integrated PPI into your own research. And as Jill said, I know we are all used to working in a collegiate way, and some more than others, and some people find it very uncomfortable to say, you know, I did this, I did that. But what we're looking for is your very own personal contribution to PPI in each of those areas. So if a member of your team has actually done some very interesting PPI, we don't want to know about it unless you can link to how you actually made that happen. So it might be that through leadership or through supporting capacity, you supported one of your team in their PPI activities. But if you have really no contribution to it, there's not a lot of point in telling us very much about it. A lot of people get confused about engagement activities. And very often we might see something where you've been very lucky to been asked to talk on Radio 4 about what you're doing. And that's great. By all means mention it. But what we're looking for is how your engagement activities link into PPI. So if you say, I did an interview on Radio 4, I talked about how PPI had actually informed my research. And as part of the interview, I asked if anyone was interested in PPI as a member of the public to get in touch and told them how to do that. That's a great way of showing that your engagement activities are linking into supporting capacity development in terms of PPI. The other thing is just very briefly about links. If you've got a video of a PPI contributor talking about a piece of research that you were directly involved with and you have a personal relationship with that person, feel free to put a link into that. That's great. But don't put a link into your organization's PPI strategy unless you actually wrote it or you had significant input into it. We all presume now that BRCs, et cetera, should have their own PPI strategy. So we don't really need to see a link to that. And then just finally, I think I'd like to say, we do give equal weight to PPI as we do to contribution to NIHR. So it is a really important element. And I've seen some excellent, really excellent senior research applications who've fallen down purely because they didn't write their PPI very well even though in some cases we know they're doing excellent PPI work. So please, it's really not even a matter of word count, because I've seen some very brief, concise applications where they've covered everything really clearly. And we do ask for an example in each of those things. So please make sure you do give us an example, and please try and base it on fact and give us some kind of factual background to that, which gives it credibility and we know that it's actually happening. Beyond that, I'm kind of looking forward to some questions about PPI. I hope that's been useful. And I'll pass back to Sarah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Steve. That was indeed very useful. I see we've got quite a few questions in the Q&A, so we will move on to that and sort of put them to our panelists. Right. So we've had some questions come in prior to the webinar, so we'll try and include those as well into our discussion, and then also try and look at some of the ones that we've got now. So let's start with contribution to NIHR, because obviously that's a big one that we get lots of questions on. So we've got a question asking us about examples of what excellent contribution would look like, and they're asking whether it would be support to NIHR panels infrastructure, or would it be to support or / conduct research which aligns with NIHR priorities. So Jill, can I direct that one to you first, and then we can sort of see if we can get some more input on that from Steve as well.
Yes, there are two criteria being asked about here. The first of it, the second one about conducting research for NIHR priorities. If you're receiving funding from NIHR, then it will have been a priority. So I think that's a given, isn't it? You might say that you have gone beyond that by saying that while the NIHR priority was this, your research has taken it forward in this way, so weaving it into the narrative. But if you've got an NIHR award, that is part of the eligibility. If you haven't, then I'm afraid it isn't. It's not. There has been a question in the post about in the chat about whether or not certain things are covered. If they are NIHR research, they are covered. So I think the list is so very long, we've not covered it today. But in the application, there are many of those funds. They're policy research units, they're the health determinants, research collaborations, obviously there are the ARCs and so on. The new ARCs, as Sophie mentioned, are not being announced until October, so you won't be able to put that in because they won't count if you're an applicant on that. So it's current. There's probably never going to be a date in which there is not some pending NIHR decision, is there? And it just so happens that the ARCs have been in around this particular time frame. So next year, everybody will know what the ARCs are. The second question was the first question. Can you remind me what that was, Sarah? About contribution to? It was about the type of contribution, was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So just asking about what types would be considered eligible, I suppose, as contribution.
Yes. And again, that is absolutely in there about saying what it is. So it's about being a member of committees, being member of a board, obviously doing reviewing, but that's not going to be enough. So the whole range of activities are listed there. There's an enormous number of them, and I don't think I can think of anybody who actually fulfills all of them, but some of them are very seen, very much that leadership role that we're looking for. So really it's about not just that you've had an NIHR award, but you've led the program, or you've developed a particular part of a program, because only one person can be the leader of a BRC or the ARC perhaps, but you have had a developmental role in a particular area of importance to NIHR and its co-funders, because obviously in some areas NIHR does some co-funding of applications. I'm afraid if you're leading a major MRC, medical research charity, or award or anything like that, you can mention that, perhaps weaving it in, but that's not the NIHR contribution that we're seeking. So just have a look and familiarize yourself with that list. And I think for a number of people, we tend to forget some of the things we do, but if you printed it out and sit there going tick, 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 then it's a very useful thing to do. And I think a lot of people who have made applications for this type of award have found it very useful in forms of thinking about their CV in terms of the upcoming ref and so on, of just being able to articulate both to themselves, but also to their university, what their contribution is, as well as using it for this particular award. So
Thank you,
back to
Jill.
you, Sarah.
Just linked to that, I think it'd be useful to answer this one while we're talking about contribution. And they've asked that their contribution spans over a decade. Does all this contribution count, or are you looking only for current and recent contribution? I think that would be useful for applicants to know.
That's a really useful comment. I think put it in there. There are many things that people have been founding mothers and fathers of, perhaps saying that I drew to NIHR attention the real underdevelopment of this particular method or this particular area of research. A decade ago, I identified that, and that has been my my life work, and it continues to be so important. And that I think is very useful if you can do the narrative element of it and explain to people while you're mentioning that. And of course, it has to be NIHR relevant, even if it wasn't NIHR at that particular time. So in the area of social care, for example, a lot of people worked very tirelessly in the area of social care, drawing it to NIHR's attention, and building up the case to have the investment that it now does. And the same with public health. And indeed, methodology has been an area where the NIHR has become increasingly interested, likewise economics.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'll come back more to some of the sort of assessment questions, but just a quick one to answer, which has been asked a few times about hyperlinks. And I know a few people have asked about that, inclusion of hyperlinks. So to clarify, the stance of the funding committee is very much that they are not keen on seeing hyperlinks be included in your application, both in the public contributor section, which is what Steve was referring to, and I know Jill spoke about this as well. So we would very much encourage you to please not include them, because it doesn't assist the reviewers in any way. Anything to add to that, Jill?
No, I mean, it's not that we're lazy, it's just they don't work, they crash. And actually, we'd like to read the narrative of what people are doing, rather than, we're not looking for references. So, just write it as a narrative.
Fantastic.
It'll make it easier as well, because they'll all crash when you try and upload to a system.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, one other sort of question is about sort of industry collaborations, and they ask to what extent is industry collaboration valued? Would work with government arm's length bodies count, or does industry mean private sector? Is that something that should be drawn out in an application?
I'll just answer that in relation to local authorities and so on. We don't see local authorities as an industry, but we do talk about them as commissioners, as policy makers, and aligned with the DHSC and indeed other government departments that may have relevance to the complex issues that people are trying to address. So just say what it does. Yes, we're very interested in the contribution to growth, and links with pharmaceutical companies, people making aids and appliances, tech, and so on are very relevant. And if you can explain your NIHR work in that area, that would be very valued, with examples, rather than just saying I speak to major producers of telecare or something like that. How do you do it? How is it engaged? And indeed, have you got NIHR links officially in grants or awards or activities in that way, or whether or not you arrange secondments or industry link-ups. So do put them in. We're all very used to industry now being interpreted very broadly.
Yeah, fantastic. Yep. So yeah, with that one, as Jill said, be very useful to kind of draw the linkages and make the linkages for the reviewers in terms of how it links to, expansion of the research agenda, to research growth. That is really what would, sort of tie it in well with the application. Right. So I want to bring in a question about some of our allied health professionals. We've got a question asking, as a nurse close to submission of a PhD with experience of research in PPIE, do nurses fulfill the assessment criteria for the award? And how are you expecting nurses, midwives, and HCPs to get involved?
Yeah. I think nurses, midwives, and allied health professionals do very well in the applications to Senior Investigators Awards. They've got a very clear mission. It's very applied, often what they're doing, and many members of the panels are leading nurses, midwives and allied health professionals who are very supportive and realise that perhaps in previous decades more now that people haven't always had the opportunities that that other professions have. So the work that has been put into by NIHR into nursing and midwifery and allied health professionals on a system-wide basis is really talking to that, hoping to see how some of the investments in doctoral awards and fellowships and so on is really showing fruit now, and that people have reached really high leadership roles within those professions and perhaps leading it professionally, or maybe have gone to be applied more generic health and care researchers. You don't have to stick to your profession. There are many people who have a professional background in something, but then perhaps develop an interest in a certain area of health and care, either a client group or a service or a particular method and so on. So yes, very much encouraged. And we do get a lot of applications now from people, and they do very well in terms of the proportion of them who get the award.
Yeah. I'll add on to that with regards to the allied health professionals and such, we do have a subcommittee which is focused specifically on applications from those backgrounds, and the funding committee members obviously have expertise from those professional groups themselves. So you really are being assessed by a peer group, and we know we have some of these concerns that are they going to be assessed very similarly to those from a medical professional background. But rest assured that the funding committee does take into account all the differences in professional experiences and backgrounds. So the award's very much tailored towards that. Steve, we have a question for you with regards to PPIE and asking whether you can advise on what an excellent contribution to PPIE capacity building and leadership at national level might look like.
Okay, this is always a tricky one, really, but capacity development is quite straightforward, really. So one of the difficulties most researchers have is accessing representative PPI within their research. And so building capacity within the PPI community is really important. Now, as Jill said, some people may say, well, I've been working with PPI for 10, 12 years. I set up a group 12 years ago specific to my specialty in terms of PPI. But in that case, it would also be useful to say, well, what are you doing currently? How has that developed? Who are the people involved, et cetera, et cetera. So building capacity that way is a good way. Again, what I've also mentioned again is engagement activities that lead through to capacity building. So for instance, if you have an open day, if you invite members of the public to come and see your research, but you use that as a dynamic way to actually recruit to PPI, and you've done it yourself, you were the actual spark that made that happen, that's good capacity development. Very often what we might see is people often referring to using a service user group within their research, or using an existing group or an existing PPI group. But it's really good to see, well, what have you actually done to build capacity within the PPI community, and how have you done that? Do that through engagement activities, do that through working with your possibly PhD students and doing some training with them, although I would also count that towards leadership. But there are all sorts of ways that we're looking at how have you actually built that PPI community and made it representative to your own specific research. I think that's really useful. And again, just to clarify a point, because I saw something coming up about hyperlinks again, which I can see is always going to be a point. I think the thing is, we don't say don't do them, but don't rely on us to look at them to get evidence for your application. If you put it in there and it's going to add credibility to me seeing you talking to a member of the public in terms of your research, put it in. But don't expect that it might be looked at, and don't rely on it for evidence, really. And 99 times out of 100, a link is not going to be really useful. And as Jill said, you run the risk of, even if you put a relevant link in, it might not work. And that basically just frustrates people, really. So there's that. In terms of leadership, in terms of PPI, there's lots of ways you can show that. It might be because strategically you did something really important. Maybe you're working in a BRC or another large organization, and you've done something strategically to lead PPI in that area or in your specialty. While it's great if it is at a national level, and I think we're always kind of looking for something beyond very fixed geographical areas, you can mix things in terms of what you've actually done in terms of leadership. And there are any number of examples. And I think we're going to give people some links to some resources, which will give them a little bit more information about that as well. Hopefully that's useful.
Thank you, Steve. Those included, the links that Steve's referring to, I think someone's asked a question about them. Those are included in the slides for the webinar. So we'll share them with you afterwards, and hopefully that'll give you some more information as well. I'm mindful that we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to pick up some questions that relate to the application form and such, and then I'll bring in our panelists as well later on. So we have a question about the letter of support, which is one of the uploads that applicants are required to fill out. So just to clarify that this particular letter of support is not meant to provide any additional information in support of your application beyond the fact that your employing organization must confirm that they are in fact happy to administer funds if you were to receive the Senior Investigator Award, and that they would be happy to be kind of the host organization and manage all of the funding on your behalf. I know somebody's asked whether they kind of have to give in any input with regards to their contribution at the institution or highlighting the excellence. That's not required as part of that letter of support. So
it's
just
a confirmation letter, isn't it? It's
a
confirmation that you exist in that institution. So yes, you don't have to get anybody to write you a glowing reference or write your own glowing reference.
No, definitely don't require reference.
No. So just to confirm that. But as I think we mentioned, do get that sorted out early on, because you would be just so annoyed, wouldn't you, if somebody was off on holiday and nobody else in admin could do it.
Exactly, especially given that, the award application submission dates early September. So definitely a good piece of advice to look at that early on. We've got a few upvotes in this question, so I'll come to this one next, which asks, how much time does the NIHR expect SIs to commit to the activities associated with the award? So we've mentioned the 2 mandatory meetings, but any guidance on how much time this award requires? So in terms of the award itself, that we don't sort of specify as part of, when you receive the award, any conditions on the amount of time that we require attendees to award recipients to spend on SI related activities. But what I would guide you to is the Senior Investigator sort of award page on the NIHR website, which I'd mentioned earlier in the webinar as well. And that landing page has a section on it which relates to the expectations of senior investigators, and that basically details the kind of activities we ask senior investigators to get involved in. As senior research leaders, the kind of involvement that we expect from you is very much engagement at a higher level with policymakers, with DHSC. We're doing a lot of mentoring related activities, with leadership activities at the NIHR. Is involved in, and we very much see our senior investigator community as being kind of at the forefront of that, so leaders for those sorts of activities. So they may be quite sort of ad hoc in nature. There isn't any specific time that we can specify that you would need to put aside for senior investigator activity, but it's very much a case of you engaging with all of the work that the NIHR does, being very active ambassadors and really kind of, spokesperson for all of the things that the NIHR gets involved in. Anything that you would add to that, Jill, in terms of how we see the senior investigator community in action?
I think it's going the extra mile in that you may feel you're a bit busy, and whether or not you could do a review, well, actually, if you're a senior investigator, then you probably do, even if it's at midnight. As somebody who might be applying for an NIHR award, at this level, you're probably already engaged in committees and know that some of them last 2 days, they're in person, some of them are really hard work and they're online, and elements like that. So there is the committee work, and then I think there is our expectation that you won't just be on a committee, but that you will take a leadership role, whether that's locally, nationally, or within profession, or within a client or patient group, or in some sort of activity like that. So it will be doing what people will hope you will do, but also breaking new ground as a senior investigator, making the most. And that's really why the award is so important, isn't it? Because it gives you the ability to provide extra admin, to provide cover for somebody to do some of the work that you would perhaps like to do, but you've got that financial award which you can play with to make the most of things, and that will perhaps give you some money to travel, to go and do things, or perhaps fund more and different forms of PPI to experiment and so on. So it's a great award to have. We're very lucky in having that sort of, write your own script for the award, but also write your own job description about how you want to take things further. If there's something that's been really frustrating for you over the years, or you find your early career research team finding frustrating, then perhaps you want to go and muck in and try and sort things out. So very much in an individual decision. We're going to ask you what you would like to do with the award, so have a think about it. So it's not just passive committee work, but maybe a little bit active as well.
Absolutely. So mindful, we've only got a few more minutes. I'm just going to include a few questions which relate to the evidence that should be included within the application. So one relates to, in terms of working with policymakers, does this apply to UK, or does it include working with those outside the UK global count, for example, the WHO?
Yes, I think we'd very much like you to work with policymakers in England, but also in wider UK, if that's relevant. And yes, there are policymakers at a whole range of levels. Increasingly, I think we'll begin to talk about the EU again, and other WHO, UN, other policymakers that are around. Many people who perhaps work in very applied social science are perhaps working with legislators and parliamentary advice and so on. So it's not just civil servants, it's actually policymakers who they work with directly. So think about that, and both in developing one's own or displaying one's own links there, but also how you might encourage your early career researchers to get involved with all the opportunities that the NIHR can open the doors for you. So policymakers, broadly speaking.
Yeah, brilliant. A quick one on contributions to NHSC, DHSC. Are they worth indicating in the application? Short answer, yes, please do.
Absolutely. Whatever the NHSE is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And then we have a question with regards to from a methodologist asking, is impact how I have shaped the design and delivery of research, or the impact of the research itself, or is it both?
Both. Yes.
Yeah.
But we'd like you to talk about perhaps not just being on one project, but what you do in the methodology world to take this forward. How have you developed a particular way of analysis, or a particular way of perspective, or how you have developed that? So as a methodologist, think about it. And I'm sure people will think about that in relation to the ref. So it's really, really important that you've got your own narrative, and it can be used for many purposes.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Steve, I wanted to just bring in this question quickly about PPI capacity building, if you wanted to address this. And they've asked whether there is, what PPI capacity building refers to. Would you want to just maybe clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it is exactly that. It's actually building capacity for PPI within your organization. So, for instance, one of the easy trip ups to make is to say, possibly within your capacity building section, I work with a group of patients. So there are patient groups like PenPeg, or there is Vocal in Manchester, etc. And basically to say, my PPI is handled by Vocal, or my PPI is handled by PenPeg, without actually talking about what you actually did to actually develop that PPI resource. So it's really about developing or expanding a PPI resource. And what I like to see is your organization may have an overarching PPI group, and you may have some involvement in that. If you have involvement in that, tell us specifically what you did in order to build it. If you've done some research-specific PPI where you've actually gone out to talk to difficult to reach or underrepresented communities and built some PPI resource within those communities, that is another excellent example of what you've done. And you may have done that through your engagement activities. So you may have gone out to give some talks to various groups within your specialty. And as part of that giving the talk, you've asked for people to get involved. And so you're actually building a list of people who are willing to take part. They might want to do some review. They might take part in focus groups. But you're looking for representation. And I'm aware one of the things we haven't talked very much about is EDI here. And so we're looking for how you have also within your capacity development built a diverse, but also a representative community of public involvement within your research. And that goes for not just within PPI, but across your whole research. So you'll also be looking at EDI in that as well. And I'm very aware that we haven't kind of tackled that subject, but that's one I know that people have a lot of questions on as well.
Yep. Thank you very much. We just have time, I think, to bring in one more question, which is asking about activities for the future. Section of the application form, and they're asking what sort of things should we include in here. So I think that'd be really useful if Jill, if you could provide like a brief steer on what we're looking for. And obviously we know it's a very important aspect of things that the committee members consider.
Well, I think that's a very personal matter, isn't it? What do you personally find something that would, really get you going? Everybody's got multiple demands on their time. So thinking about what perhaps is a very knotty problem, or perhaps an area that you've always wanted to go into, but time hasn't permitted. The list, I think, of activities is there. I don't think we want to see somebody saying, I think I might join a committee. If I'm successful in this award. Well, we hope you're going to be on a committee anyway, and it's not a sort of, if you give me it, I will join a committee relationship. So really thinking creatively, as again, talk to other senior investigators about how they're doing their particular award. You might get inspiration from that, and indeed you don't want to duplicate, or you could join up with them. Going back to Steve's point about research inclusion, we expect that to be embedded throughout the application, how you have very much developed through your NIHR investments, the research inclusion agenda, that it's not going to be new to you or anything like that, but you have demonstrated that you have been very transparent in research inclusion, that you've identified where problems might lie and what you've done to address those at a whole number of levels, whether that's the actual research subject itself, your participants, your dissemination and impact, your knowledge mobilization, all of those things. We expect research inclusion to be like a golden thread throughout those. And if you have ambitions perhaps in that area, articulate them, what the problem is and how you really are planning to address that.
Absolutely, really important point, I think, end on, and I'm really glad we had a chance to bring that into the discussion as well. I think we do need to draw to a close now. We're just coming on to 12. So thank you very much for joining us today, and really for the broad sort of range of questions that we got. We hope that that's been useful to get responses to those. And thank you very much to our panelists for really providing those really key insights that go beyond the information that we provide on the websites and the information we have regarding the award. And as we've said before, if you have any questions during the application, if you'd like to discuss your eligibility or would like further information about any aspects of the award itself, please feel free to reach out to us, to the team, and we're very happy to answer any questions and have a more detailed discussion with you. All right, thank you very much, everybody, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you.